Hi everyone, welcome again to the Menshik Club. Um, it's another dreary day in lockdown here in Dublin, and I thought I would analyze a game that I've really liked for a while now, and it's between Xie Jun and Bent Larsen. Xie Jun was women's world champion. She took the title from Maya Kaburdinidze in the 1990s. She was women's world champion, I think, 3 times. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. And this was from an event that took place in Monaco in 1994. Um, it was this was a women versus veterans event, which is something that has been a popular thing all the way back to I think the 1940s is the first time I can think of that there was an event planned as kind of an exhibition between women players and senior male grandmasters. But Xie Jun is quite an impressive person. Besides being one of the first women to get the full GM title and a women's world champion, she also is a doctorate in psychology, and she's now an international arbiter. I don't think she's played in tournaments actively since like 2007 or maybe 2008. At least I can't find any games from her after that point. But very, very accomplished Chinese grandmaster. So, so we're going to look at this game, which I've already played the first 2 moves here: e4, g6, d4. And Xie Jun was playing white, and Larsen had the black pieces. So Larsen played bishop g7, and we have knight c3, c6. This is a nice flexible move. Doesn't reveal whether black is going to go for sort of a hybrid Caro-Kann with d5 or stick with a more Peart's King's Indian type of setup. So Xie Jun played knight f3, and this is obviously a pretty standard move. Many other options, but this is perfectly solid. Larsen played d6, so going for more of a Peart's defense. h3 and knight f6. So h3 was obviously to prevent bishop g4. And now Xie Jun plays another prophylactic move, a4. This is designed to stop black's other possible freeing move, which is b5. And Larsen castled. Bishop e3, knight b d7, bishop e2, e5, d takes e5, d takes e5, and now Xie Jun castled. She could also have played, instead of this, another possible move is queen to d6. I've never been crazy about this type of move in this type of position. It looks impressive, but black has the possibility of just playing rook to e8, and then bishop to f8. And that'll drive the queen out. And I think that really black probably wants their bishop relocated to f8 anyway, so I'm not sure how much this queen d6 would accomplish. But it is Stockfish's favorite move in this position, so I don't want to completely knock it either. Larsen, in response to castling by white, played queen to e7. So she could have played queen d2, but decided instead to play queen d3, intending to put the queen on c4, and also protecting the e4 pawn. So black replied a5. I used to play the Philidor and would get this kind of structure quite often. And I sometimes didn't like this for black because because of the weaknesses on the b6 square, and also just it's a little bit of a rigid queenside pawn structure. But this is basically a pretty equal position. I don't think there's much of an advantage. Maybe white has a tiny advantage here, just because of better control of the d-file and slightly better development. But my experience was it's likely to evaporate because you don't really have any imbalance in the pawn structure. So the moves are queen c4, rook e8, rook f d1, so taking control of the d-file, h6, and now knight d2. I like this idea, planning to relocate the knight to c4, and also giving some additional support to the e4 pawn, and allowing the bishop on e2 to move potentially to g4. And black, in the meanwhile, has prevented bishop g5 and also given their knight this square to go to, intending to play out to g5. So queen b3, knight g5, and now knight c4. So white just wants to target these two squares, b6 and d6, with their knight, and knight c5 by Larsen. This is a mistake, and probably knight to e6 from g5 would have been a little bit more accurate, but Xie Jun replied queen a3, attacking the knight and basically forcing it to move. So knight from c to e6, and she now decided the time was right to trade queens. And this is quite a strong decision because now she has knight b6, which forces rook b8. And now if you notice, both of these pieces on b8 and c8 are pretty much frozen in place. The bishop doesn't have d7 to go to because it's covered twice by the white rook and knight. The rook has no squares to go to, and without being able to move the bishop, the rook also can't get free, at least not easily. So she definitely has the initiative here, and a pretty significant advantage. She played bishop to g4, pinning the knight on e6 to the bishop on c8. Black replied rook e8, and now we have bishop takes g5. So giving up the bishop pair, but doubling black's pawns. And after h takes g5, you may want to pause your video here to find the most accurate move for white. This is one of the reasons I picked this game, actually, is because this next move by white is a real grandmaster move, I think. There are other tries, but this is really shows a really deep understanding of the position. It's not a move I think I would have come up with over the board. I'm nowhere near as high rated as she is, but I don't think that it's a move that I would have considered. So pause your videos. And congratulations if you came up with the move knight to b1. Exclam. So we'll see the point of this move in a minute, but if you look at some of the other possible moves that are maybe a little bit more natural looking, rook d2, for instance, looks natural to double the rooks on the d-file, but then black has simply bishop f8, rook a d1, bishop c5. And this is going to drive the knight out of b6. Either it's going to trade itself for the bishop on c8, trading a good piece for a bad piece, and also just freeing black's game a little bit. So in this case, white would have a small advantage, but nothing really concrete. And rook d3 also runs into this bothersome move, knight c5. White can play bishop takes c8, but then knight takes d3, bishop d7, knight c5, takes, and white doesn't have a really significant advantage anymore. It's pretty close to equal. King f1 also allows just bishop f8, knight e2, bishop c5. So if you sort of understand why these moves aren't that terrific, then you understand now maybe why knight b1 is better. Because after bishop f8, knight d2, bishop c5, now white can play knight c4, and now the knight is going to just get replaced by another knight if black plays bishop takes on b6. And black is left with the same two bad pieces on b8 and c8. So this is what happened in the game. Bishop takes b6, knight takes b6. And now black plays a very natural looking plan, which is to move the king over to e7 and attempt to trade rooks on the d file and relieve some of the pressure on the position. So king f8, rook d2, king e7, rook d1, and now rook f8, just planning to play the move f5 and again gain some breathing space. But the problem is that here white has a very strong continuation. Knight takes c8 check. And the point is that after rook takes c8, the bishop is no longer protecting d7. So now rook d7 check. This might not look so terrible. King f8 doesn't look very appetizing. First of all, because then just bishop takes e6, and we can all see that black's position is really, really unappetizing here. They can't get control of the d-file back. The pawns are shattered. In a king and pawn ending, white would simply... In a king and pawn ending, white would simply march the king up. Let's get the position back. Here it is. Yeah, in a king and pawn ending, white would simply march the king up and eat all these pawns. So trading the rooks doesn't really help. And otherwise, black is just in a terrible bind. So king f8 is just not an appetizing possibility. King f6 looks better. In fact, this is a losing blunder, but it's what Larsen played. And I'll let you again pause your video to see if you can figure out what Xie Jun's response to this move was. So congratulations if you found it. The move is bishop takes e6. The first thing to notice is the king takes e6 is not possible because rook d6 is actually checkmate. So after bishop takes e6, f takes e6 is forced. And now I would imagine that Xie Jun probably had this idea in mind already. She saw that if her rook on d1 were brought to f3, that would just be checkmate. It's a really beautiful idea because it's like a back rank mate. No. It's like a back rank mate, except that it's on the f file. which I think is a really, really strange and unusual thing. I've never seen anything quite like this before in an actual game. Maybe in a study, but not in an actual game. So she might want to try rook to d3, for instance. But then black can actually play g4 and give themselves some breathing room. And even if you play h4 to try to take the g5 square away, the g pawn still covers f3. So that should give you the actual move in the game, which was g4. So this freezes all of black's pawns, freezes the king. The rook from c8 can't come to d8 because you just drop a rook. And there's basically no way to stop rook d3, rook f3, and checkmate. I challenge you to try to find a way to actually stop this without giving up a whole rook for black. So this is quite a beautiful game. I really liked the move knight to b1. It's a retreating move, but it's actually a move that keeps all of white's advantages in the position. And doesn't allow black to solve their problems. And I love this. I love this checkmating idea at the end. It's basically a capture without a check, followed by two non-checking quiet moves, and black just can't stop mate. So very, very lovely position, and I'm assuming that I will be looking at more of Xie Jun's games in the future. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.